Hello, my beautiful people. Welcome back. And now that I am no longer Sarah Tangled Hair, let us find out what happened after the Yuletide feast. After the Yuletide feast, Egil grew so depressed that he did not speak a word. Noticing this, Arnbjorn spoke to him and asked why he was so depressed. I want you to tell me whether you are ill or if there is some other reason, he said, so that we might find a remedy. Egil said, I'm not suffering from an ailment. I'm just very anxious about how to claim the property I won when I killed Lot the Pale up north in Moor. I have heard that the king's agents have seized all the property and claimed it in the king's name. I would like your assistance in recovering it. I don't think there's a law in this country that prevents you from acquiring that property, said Arnbjorn, but it seems to have been put in very secure hands. The king's palace is an easy place to enter but hard to leave. I have had a lot of trouble claiming debts from those overbearing characters, even when I enjoyed much closer confidence with the king. But my friendship with King Hakon is only recent. But I must do as the old saying has it, tend the oak if you want to live under it. I am interested in putting to the test, replied Egil, whether the law is on our side. Maybe the king will grant me what is mine by rights here, because I am told he is a just man and abides by the laws he himself has established in this country. I have more than half a mind to go and see the king and put the matter to him. Arnbjorn said he did not feel eager to do so. I don't expect there's much chance of reconciling your temper and rashness with the king's disposition and severity, because I don't think he is a friend of yours or feels any reason to be either. I prefer we drop the matter and not bring it up again. But if you really want, Egil, I will go see the king and put the matter to him. Egil expressed his thanks and gratitude and was eager to try that course. At this time Hakon was in Rogaland, but he sometimes stayed in Hordaland instead, so it was not difficult to go to see him. This was shortly after the two men's conversation. Arnbjorn made preparations for his journey and explained to everyone that he was going to see the king. He manned a 20-seater rowboat that he owned with men from his household, but Egil remained behind at Arnbjorn's wish. Once he was ready, Arnbjorn set off and had a smooth journey. He met with King Hakon and was given a good welcome. After he had been there for a short while, he stated his errand to the king, telling him that Egil Skallagrim's son was in the country and laid claim to all the money once owned by Lot the Pale. I have been told that the law is in Egil's favor, king, but that your agents have taken the money and claimed it in your name. I beseech you to grant justice to Egil. After a long pause, the king answered him, I do not know why you are presenting such a claim on Egil's behalf. He came to see me once, and I told him I did not want him staying in this country for reasons that you are well aware of. Egil has no need to make such a claim to me as he did to my brother Eirik. And I will tell you another thing, Arnbjorn. You may only stay in this country on condition that you do not value foreigners more highly than myself for my words. I know your loyalty lies with your foster son, my nephew Harald Eriksson. The best course for you would be to go abroad to stay with him and his brothers, because I have a strong suspicion that men like you will prove unreliable if a confrontation arises between me and Eirik's sons. Since the king was absolutely firm, Arnbjorn realized it was futile to argue about the matter further, and made preparations to go home. The king was rather angry and abrupt to Arnbjorn after he found out the reason for his visit. Nor was it in Arnbjorn's character to humble himself before the king. So they parted at this point. Arnbjorn returned home and told Egil how his errand had turned out. I will not be asking the king's favor over such matters again, he added. Egil was very sullen at this news, feeling he had lost a great amount of money that was his by rights. A few days later, when Arnbjorn was in his room early one morning, and there were not many people about, he had Egil called in to him. When he arrived, Arnbjorn opened a chest and handed over 40 marks of silver to him with the words, I am paying you this money for the lands owned by Lot the Pale, Egil. It seems fair to me to let you have this reward for my kinsman Frigger and myself for saving his life from Njot. I know you did it as a favor to me, and it's my duty to make sure that you are not deprived of what of yours by law. Egil accepted the money and thanked Arnbjorn. He regained his good spirits. Arnbjorn spent the winter on his lands, and the following spring he announced that he wanted to go on some Viking raids. He owned a good selection of ships, and prepared 3 longships for the journey that spring, all of them large, and took a crew of 300 with him. The ship he went on was well manned with people from his household and many local farmers' sons. Egil joined him at the helm of one of the ships, taking many of the band of men he had brought with him from Iceland. Egil sent the merchant ship he had brought from Iceland on to Vik, where he took on men to guard its cargo. Arnbjorn and Egil sailed their longship south along the coast, heading with their men for Saxony, where they stayed during the summer and won great wealth. When autumn arrived, they went north on more raids and moored their ships off Frisia. One night, when the weather was calm, they anchored in a large estuary, since there were few places to harbour there and tide was far out. On shore were great rolling plains, with a forest a short distance away. It had been raining heavily, and the fields were wet. Then they set off for land, leaving 1/3 of the men behind to guard the ships. They went along the river bank with the forest on the other side, and soon came across a village where a lot of farmers lived. All the villagers ran for their lives when they noticed the raiders, and the Vikings set off in pursuit. Then they found another village, and a third. Everyone who was able to do so fled from them. The land was flat with great plains. Ditches had been dug in many places and were full of water. These were meant to separate the fields and meadows, but in some places there were bridges for crossing over, made of logs with planks on the floor. All the villagers fled to the forest. Once the Vikings had ventured quite deep inland, the Frisians mustered forces in the woods, and when there were more than 300 of them, they set off to confront the Vikings and fight them. A fierce battle ensued, and in the end the Frisians fled and the Vikings chased after them. The fleeing villagers spread out in all directions, and so did their pursuers. Eventually they all split up into groups of a few men. With a few men of his own, Egil set off in hot pursuit after a large group. The Frisians reached a ditch and crossed it, then took the bridge away. When Egil arrived with his men on the other side, he took a run up and leapt over, but it was too far for the others, and none of them tried. Seeing this, the Frisians attacked Egil, and he defended himself. 11 of them attacked him, but eventually he killed them all. After that, Egil put back the bridge in place and crossed over the ditch again to find that all his men had gone back to the ships. He was near the forest then, so he skirted it on his way back to the ship to provide himself with cover if he needed it. The Vikings took a great deal of plunder inland and cattle as well. When they reached their ships, some of them slaughtered the cattle or took their booty out of the ships, while the others formed a wall of shields in front of them, because a large band of Frisians had come back down to the shore and they were firing arrows at them. Then the Frisians received more support, and when Egil reached the shore, they saw what was going on. He ran towards the crowd at full pelt with his halberd in front of him and his shield thrown over his back. As he lunged out with his halberd, everyone jumped back and cleared the way for him through the column. Then he headed down towards his men who had given him up for dead. They went back to their ships and sailed off to Denmark. When they reached Limfjord and anchored off Hals, Arnbjorn called a meeting with his men to tell him about his plans. "I'm going to meet Eirik's sons," he said, "and I'll take anyone with me who wants to come. I have heard that the brothers are here in Denmark with great armies. They go raiding in the summer but stay in Denmark during the winter. If anyone would prefer to go back to Norway instead of coming with me, I give my permission. It seems advisable for you to go back to Norway, Egil, and then straight back to Iceland when we part." The men switched ships, and those who wanted to go back to Norway joined Egil. Many more chose to go with Arnbjorn. Egil and Arnbjorn parted with kindness and friendship. Arnbjorn went to see Eirik's sons, and they joined the army of Harald Greycloak, his foster son, and stayed with him for the rest of their lives. Egil went north to Vik and entered Oslo fjord. The merchant ship was there that he had sent south that spring, together with its cargo and crew. Thorstein, Dora's son, went to see Egil and invited him to stay for the winter, along with any of his men that he chose. Egil accepted the offer and had his ships drawn up and the cargo taken to town for storage. Some of the men who had been with him stayed, while others returned to their homes in the north. Egil stayed with Thorstein. 10 or 12 of them were there in all. He spent the winter there amid great celebrations. King Harald Fairhair had brought Norway under his rule as far east as Varmland. The first person to control Varmland was Olaf Woodcarver, father of Halfdan Whiteleg, who was the first of his family to become king of Norway. King Harald was directly descended from him, and all the line had ruled Varmland, collecting tribute there and appointing men to govern it. In King Harald's old age, Varmland was governed by Earl Arnvind. As was the case in many places, the tribute proved more difficult to collect than when Harald was younger, now that his sons were disputing control of Norway. There is little supervision of the more remote tributary lands. Once King Hakon ruled in peace, he sought to re-establish his rule throughout the lands that his father had reigned over. King Hakon sent a band of 12 men east of Varmland. After collecting tribute from the Earl, they were going through Eideskog forest, when they were ambushed by robbers and all were killed. The same happened to other men that King Hakon sent to Varmland. They were killed and the money went missing. Some people claimed Earl Arnfrid was sending his own men to ambush the king's men and bring the money back to him. So while King Hakon was staying in Trondheim, he sent a third party there. They were told to go east to Vik and see Thorstein, with an ultimatum ordering him to go to Varmland and collect the tribute for the king, or be banished from the realm. By then, the king had heard that Thorstein's uncle Arnbjorn was in Denmark with Eirik's sons, and also that they had a large army there and went raiding during the summers. King Hakon did not feel that any of them could be trusted, because he expected hostilities from Eirik's sons if they ever acquired a large enough force to rebel against him. He dealt out the same treatment to all Arnbjorn's kinsmen, relatives by marriage and friends. He banished many of them and issued others with ultimatums. Thorstein was told his distrust was the main reason that the king issued the ultimatum to him. The messenger who brought the command from the king was a widely travelled man. He had spent long periods in Denmark and Sweden and was familiar with the routes and knew all the people there too. He had also been all over Norway. When he had presented Thorstein Sturluson with the order, Thorstein told Egil about the messenger's errand and asked how he should respond. It seems obvious to me that the king wants you out of the country, like the rest of Arnbjorn's family, said Egil. It's a dangerous mission for a man of your standing. I advise you to call the king's messenger in to talk to you, and I'll be there when you do. Then we'll see what happens. Thorstein did as Egil said and brought them in to talk to him. The messengers gave a straight account of the reason for their visit and of the king's order that Thorstein should either undertake the journey or else be made an outlaw. Then Egil said, I can see what lies behind this business of yours. If Thorstein doesn't want to go on the mission, you will go and collect the tribute yourselves. The messenger said that he had guessed correctly. Thorstein will not be going on this mission, Egil declared. A man of his standing is not obliged to undertake such a paltry voyage. On the other hand, Thorstein will do his duty to follow the king in Norway and abroad if the king demands it of him. If you want to take some of Thorstein's men with you on the mission, he will grant you that, along with anything you ask him to provide for the journey. The messengers discussed the offer among themselves and agreed to it, provided Egil would join them. The king hates him and would be pleased with their mission if we could arrange to have him killed, they said. Then he can drive Thorstein out of the country too if he sees fit. Then they told Thorstein that they wouldn't mind the plan if Egil went with them, and Thorstein stayed behind. Let it be done then, said Egil. I will take Thorstein's place on the mission. How many men do you think you need to take from here? There are 8 of us, they said, and we would like 4 more from here to make 12. Egil said this would be done. On and Sioni and some of Egil's men had gone down to the sea to see about their ships and the cargo they had put in storage that autumn, and had not returned yet. Egil thought that was a great setback because the king's men were impatient about going on the journey and did not want to wait. Egil and the 3 men who were going with him made preparations for their journey. They took horses and sleighs, and so did the king's men. There had been heavy snows, which had altered all the routes that could be taken. Once they were ready, they set off and drove inland. On their way to Eid, it snowed so much one night that it was impossible to make out where the trails were. The next day, they made slow progress because they kept sinking into the snowdrifts whenever they left the trail. In the course of the day, they paused to rest their horses near a wooded ridge. The trail forks here, they told Egil. The farmer who lives beneath the ridge is named Arnold, and he's a friend of ours. We will go and stay with him, and you should go up on the ridge. When you get there, you'll soon see a big farm where you are sure of a place to stay. A very wealthy man called Armand Bird lives there. We will meet up again early tomorrow morning and go to Ardeskog in the evening. A farmer lives there, a good man called Thorfinn. Then they parted. Egil and his men went up on the ridge. As for the king's men, as soon as they were out of Egil's sight, they put on skis they had brought with them, then went back as fast as they could. Travelling day and night, they went to Uppland and north from there across Dovrefjell, and did not stop until they reached King Haakon and told him how things had gone. Egil and his companions crossed the ridge that evening and lost their way at once in the heavy snows. Their horses repeatedly sank down to the drifts which had to be pulled out. There were rocky slopes and brushwood which were difficult to negotiate. The horses caused them a long delay, and it was extremely hard going on foot too. Exhausted, they made their way down from the ridge at last, saw a big farm, and headed for it. When they arrived in the fields in front of the farmhouse, they saw Armand and his men standing outside. They exchanged greetings and asked each other if there was any news. When he heard that these men were envoys from the king, Armand invited them to stay, and they accepted. Armand's farmhands took their horses and baggage, while the farmer invited Egil and his men to go into the main room, and they did so. Armand gave Egil a seat on the lower bench and seated his companions further down the table. They spoke at length about their tough journey that night, and the people who lived there were astonished that they had made it at all, saying that the ridge could not even be crossed when it was free of snow. "Don't you think the best thing I can provide you with now is to lay the tables and give you a meal for the night, and then you can go to bed?" asked Armand. "You'll get the best night's rest that way." "That would be fine," said Egil. Then Armand had the tables laid for them, and large bowls of curds were brought in. Armand gave the impression he was upset at not having any ale to serve them, because Egil and his men were so thirsty after their ordeal. They picked up the bowls and gulped down the curds. Egil much more than the others. No other food was served. Many people were living and working on the farm. The farmer's wife sat on a cross bench with some other women beside her. Their daughter, aged 10 or 11, was on the floor. The wife called over to her and whispered in her ear. Then the girl went round to where Egil was sitting at the table, and she spoke this verse. "My mother sent me to talk to you, and bring Egil word to keep on his guard. The maid of the ale horn said treat your stomach as if you expect to be served something better." Armand slapped the girl and told her to keep quiet. "You're always saying things at the worst of times." The girl went away, and Egil put down the bowl of curds, which was almost empty. Then the bowls were taken away, and the men of the household went to their seats as well. Tables were laid across the whole room, and food was spread out on them. Choice food was served to Egil and his men and everyone else. Then the ale was brought in, an exceptionally strong brew. Each man was given a horn to drink from, and the host made a special point of letting Egil and his men drink as much as possible. Egil drank incessantly for a long time at first, and when his companions became incapacitated, he drank what they could not finish as well. This continued until the tables were cleared. Everyone became very drunk, and for every toast that Armand drank, he said, "Drink this to your health, Egil." The man of the household drank to his companion's health with the same words. The man was given the job of keeping Egil and his companies served with one toast after another, and he urged them to drink it up at once. Egil told his companions they should not drink any more, and he drank theirs for them too when there was no way to avoid it. Egil started to feel that he would not be able to go on like this. He stood up and walked across the floor to where Armand was sitting, seized him by the shoulders, and thrust him up against the wall post. And Egil spewed a torrent of vomit that gushed all over Armand's face, filling his eyes and nostrils and mouth and pouring down his beard and chest. Armand was close to choking, and when he managed to let out a breath, a jet of vomit gushed out with it. All Armand's men who were there said that Egil had done a base and despicable deed by not going outside when he needed to vomit, but had made a spectacle of himself in the drinking room instead. Egil said, "Don't blame me for following the master of the house's example. He's spewing his guts up just as much as I am." Then Egil went over to his place, sat down, and asked for a drink. Then he blared out this verse. With my cheeks swell, I repaid the compliment you served. I had heavy cause to venture my steps across the floor. Many guests thank favours with sweeter flavoured rewards, but we meet rarely. Armand's beard is awash with dregs of ale. Armand leapt to his feet and ran out, but Egil asked for more to drink. The farmer's wife told the man who had been pouring out the drinks all evening to keep serving them so they would not lack drink for as long as they wanted. He took a large horn, filled it, and carried it over to Egil. Egil quaffed the drink, then spoke this verse. Drink every toast down, though the rider of the waves brings brimful horns often to the shaper of verse. I will leave no drop of malt sea, even if the maker of swordplay brings me horns until morning. Egil went on drinking for some time, polishing off every drinking horn that was brought to him. But there was not much merrymaking in the room, even though a few other men were still drinking. Then Egil and his companions stood up and took their weapons from the wall where they had hung them, went to the barn where their horses were being kept, lay down in the straw, and slept the night there. Egil got up at daybreak the next morning. He and his companions prepared to leave, and when they were ready, they went back to the farm to look for Armand. When they found the chamber where Armand was sleeping with his wife and daughter, Egil flung the door open and went over to his bed. He drew his sword, seized Armand by the beard with his other hand, and tugged him over to the side of the bed. Armand's wife and daughter both jumped up and implored Egil not to kill him. Egil said he would spare him for their sake. That is a fair thing to do, but if he were worth the bother, I would kill him. Then he spoke a verse. His wife and daughter aid the foul-mouthed man who twines arms with rings. I do not fear this battle-maker. You will not feel deserving of such dealings from the poet for that drink you served him. Let us be gone far on our way. Then Egil cut off Armand's beard close to the chin and gouged out one of his eyes with his finger, leaving it hanging on his cheek. After that, Egil went off to his companions. They went on their way and arrived at Thorfinn's farm early in the morning. He lived in Eigaskog. Egil and his men asked for breakfast and somewhere to rest their horses. Thorfinn granted them that, and Egil and his men went into the main room. Egil asked Thorfinn if he knew anything about his companions. We arranged to meet here, he said. Thorfinn replied, 6 men came by here some time before daybreak, all heavily armed. One of Thorfinn's farmhands added, I went out to gather timber in the night and came across 6 men who were going somewhere. They were Armand's farmhands, and it was well before daybreak. I don't know whether these were the same 6 you mentioned. Thorfinn said the men he met had been travelling later than when the farmhand brought the cartload of timber back. When Egil and his men sat down to eat, he saw a sick woman lying on the crossbench. Egil asked Thorfinn who the woman was and why she was in such a poor state. Thorfinn said she was his daughter, Helga. She has been weak for a long time. She was suffering from a wasting sickness and could not sleep at night because of some kind of delirium. Has anyone tried to find out the cause of her illness? Egil asked. We had some runes carved, said Thorfinn. The son of a farmer who lives close by did it, and since then she's been much worse. Do you know any remedy, Egil? Egil said. It might not do any harm if I try something. When Egil had eaten his fill, he went to where the woman was lying and spoke to her. He ordered them to lift her out of her bed and place clean sheets underneath her, and this was done. When he examined the bed she had been lying in and found a whalebone with runes carved on it. After reading the runes, Egil shaved them off and scraped them into the fire. He burned the whalebone and had her bedclothes aired. Then Egil spoke a verse. No man should carve runes unless he can read them well. Many a man goes astray around those dark letters. On the whalebone I saw 10 secret letters carved. From then the linden tree took her long harm. Egil cut some runes and placed them under the pillow of the bed where she was lying. She felt as though she were waking from a deep sleep, and she said she was well again, but still very weak. But her father and mother were overjoyed. Thorfinn offered Egil all the provisions he thought he needed. Well, Egil is a man of very many qualities. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Egil's Saga, The Icelanders, and see you next time. Ha det.